Hello BookTube, this is Weekly Reads. My October reading plan consisted of 2 points. The first point was to start the month with a reread of Demon Slayer by Koyoharu Gotouge. Demon Slayer is a 23-volume series set in the Taisho era of Japan, 1912 to 1926. The series stars siblings Tanjiro and Nezuko Kamado. At the beginning of the series, Tanjiro travels from the family home to sell some charcoal in a nearby village. While he's away, the demon Muzan Kibutsuji attacks the Kamado home, slaughtering the entire family save for Nezuko, whom he transforms into a demon. When Tanjiro returns home, Nezuko initially attacks Tanjiro, overcome by her demonic urge to eat humans. However, as Tanjiro is holding Nezuko off, her humanity begins to reassert itself. It's at this moment that a high-ranking member of the Demon Slayer Corps, Giyu Tomioka, arrives with the intention of saving Tanjiro and slaying Nezuko. However, what happens is something of a three-way fight. Giyu is trying to rescue Tanjiro from Nezuko. Tanjiro is trying to defend Nezuko from Giyu, and ultimately Nezuko defends Tanjiro from Giyu. The weirdness, the strangeness of this encounter gives Giyu the idea to recommend to Tanjiro that he try out for the Demon Slayer Corps. And after 2 years of training, Tanjiro is accepted into the ranks of the Demon Slayers, along with Nezuko, whom he travels around with, fulfilling various missions. Over the course of Tanjiro and Nezuko's early adventures, they meet two fellow rookie Demon Slayers, Zenitsu and Inosuke. And together the four are typical traveling companions for much of the series. Tanjiro's goals are to find a way to restore Nezuko's humanity to her, to turn her back into a human, and to contribute to the ultimate downfall of Muzan, who is the progenitor of all demons in this setting. I had an absolute blast rereading the series. I think rereading Demon Slayer will become an October tradition. By leaps and bounds, Demon Slayer was the only thing I read this week that I really liked. I've already talked about Demon Slayer earlier this week in a separate video, so do check that out if you haven't already. But this was amazing. Now on to what didn't work out. And fortunately, I'm in a much better mood today than I was yesterday. And we might get into that once I talk about the next batch of books. So the other point of my October reading plan was to finally have a good Victober. Victober is a booktube event in the month of October in which participants read Victorian literature. Victober has been going on for a decade or more now and is probably the most beloved booktube event on the booktube calendar in this corner of booktube, save maybe March Mystery Madness. I have never had a good Victober. Every time I have participated in Victober, things have not gone well for me at all. I do not know if it's just where I am in my reading life. Victorian literature does not really appeal to me, or if it's I just haven't found the right works of Victorian literature to add to my collection. But I was enthusiastic about this Victober. I have, over the last few months, been... I don't think infected is quite the right word. Been under the spell, might be a better word for this, of a strong desire to beef up the part of my library that I call classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. The bookcases you can see one bookcase, but there's another one directly behind me that I'm covering up. That's that part of my collection. And I have a little space there and a whole shelf free under there. So I've been under a spell for the last few months wanting to beef up this section of my library. I don't quite know why, but I've been under it and I've been indulging. Anyway, so one of the books I picked up recently allowed me to devote this Victober to Dickens versus Trollope. The plan was to reread, after 19 years, Bleak by Charles Dickens, which I recently re-added to my collection. I had a copy 19 years ago that I long since got rid of and decided to re-add it to my collection. And to redeem The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope after about 3 or 4 years. So, starting off with, and needless to say, in keeping with tradition, this Victober was also not successful. So, let's start with Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Bleak House is about the corrosive effects of a generation-running inheritance dispute called Jarndyce and Jarndyce. It is also the story of a young orphan named Esther Summerson, who is raised by a woman she believes to be her godmother, and shortly before said godmother's death, it is revealed to Esther that she is illegitimate. And once the godmother dies, Esther is taken in by Mr. Jarndyce, a wealthy individual who I'm assuming made his money outside of independent of the inheritance dispute Jarndyce and Jarndyce. He is a party, one of many in the novel, to this suit, although he has not let it consume him like so many other claimants have. Through the intermediary of his lawyer, Mr. King, Esther is sent to a boarding school where she basically is trained to be a teacher and governess eventually. And eventually, for most of the novel, she is a companion to another young orphan who Mr. Jarndyce takes in. So the first chapter introduces Jarndyce and Jarndyce, and at the end of the chapter, the last bit of business is that there are two claimants to Jarndyce and Jarndyce who have been orphaned. And Mr. Jarndyce, a competing claimant, recommends or requests that he be given guardianship of his distant relations. And that is approved. And Esther is assigned the pretty much to be the companion to the Ada Claire, one of the two. And things progress from there. There are a number of issues arising from Jarndyce and Jarndyce. The trio go on a number of adventures throughout England. There is eventually a murder mystery involved, and a number of secrets are revealed, including at the end the solution to Jarndyce and Jarndyce. In both a true heir is finally settled upon, and, well, the estate can no longer support anything. So, much like with Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, I remember, and also The Rat by Günter Grass, I remembered this novel quite fondly. But my rereading experience or attempt doesn't bear that out. I gave up on the novel within the first section. I read the first 2 chapters. The first one introducing the scene, talking about the Court of Chancery, and then the second one introduces the Dedlocks, of whom Lady Dedlock is a major character for much of the novel, as it's revealed that she is Esther's biological mother. And then the rest of the chapters are told from Esther's point of view as her background is explored. She meets her fellow orphans, and they get ready to travel to Bleak House by staying overnight with a weird philanthropist and her brood that she does not take care of. But anyway, so I found the novel, the descriptions, to be rather cloying. And it really bugged me, particularly once Esther took over as the narrator. I just really was not enjoying it, and quickly realized that I didn't actually want to read this. Now, that is better than my reaction to The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. Excuse me. This is a novel about a con man named Mr. Melmoth, who has come to England to set up a Ponzi scheme. And he basically recruits a number of investors. And while he's basically recruiting a number of investors that he can scam, a number of down-on-their-luck aristocrats are hoping to pretty much return the favor by marrying his daughter, who is his only heir. And so things progress from there. I managed to get to the second chapter, which pretty much the first 2 chapters introduce the family of one of these impoverished noblemen or gentry who hope to make their fortune by marrying the young Miss Melmoth. So the first chapter looks at Lady Carberry, who has, in order to supplement her income, has decided to write for a living. And so the chapter is mostly letters to 3 editors, either looking for a job or asking for favors. And then the second chapter delves a bit more deeply into the Carberry family. As I was reading these 2 chapters, I came to loathe what I was reading. I hated it. And that was the reaction I had the last time I tried this book, was I just hated it. So I'm deciding not to continue with it. So after the failure of October, I decided to pivot to Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant. And I was not successful here either. I managed to read the first story in the collection, The Ice Wagon Going Down the Street, which is, so the frame of the story is a married couple who the husband is from a family on the decline. Generations back, the family was quite wealthy, but previous generation has largely squandered the family money. And the main character is basically living off of the fumes of the family name, hoping that the name can get him a job that is well paid, but not a whole lot of work. And so the frame is the family is staying with his sister for an extended period of time while he figures out what he's going to do next. But the bulk of the story is set in Geneva, when he was a filing clerk dealing with photographic files. A co-worker of his, Agnes, was a teetotaler, and they were both acquainted to a well-off individual, and they attended a costume party, although the main character and his wife did not attend in costume, while Agnes did. And Agnes ended up getting drunk, because of course, she never drinks, so she did, and she got drunk, so the main character is forced to make sure that Agnes gets home, and nothing really happens. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure what the point of the story was. I can recognize the prose is rather beautiful, but it's like, where was the story going? It just didn't appeal to me. And that was true of the other stories that I dipped into, which were Irina, which is about a widow who is taking care of her grandson while one of her daughters is in the hospital. The Late Homecomer, which is about a German POW who's finally returning to Berlin after an extended stay as a prisoner of war in France. And then The Muslim Wife, which I didn't quite get much into. So, I'm not entirely sure if it's fair to describe her work. Because what I've read of Mavis Gallant, I'm very much put in mind of Alice Munro and Steve Donahue's description of reading her work, or I guess in this case their work, as basically just reading train timetables. So that was very disappointing. And to further extend the disappointment for most of this reading week, except for Demon Slayer, is Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, translated from the Italian by Sophie Hughes. So this is a novel about a couple, Tom and Anna, who basically work as freelancers in Berlin. And things happen, I guess, at some point, eventually. The first two chapters are long, 10-page descriptions of their apartment. The first chapter deals with sort of the staged description. Sort of like you're staging it to sell it or to rent it, or if it's up on an Airbnb ad. And then the second chapter is more of the apartment having been lived in. And I'm reading this and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. So that was a disappointment. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to read today. I think this weekend I'm going to read some manga, and then I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do the work week next week. I will, of course, report back next weekly reads on how things work out. But these 4 books, I don't know why I do this to myself. I know full well that while in my late teens and early to mid-20s, I was rather fond of, or at least I remembered myself to have been rather fond of the classics and modern and contemporary literary fiction. That fondness doesn't really exist anymore. And I don't get on with them for these works. But there's a part of me that periodically I don't know if it's nostalgia or that sense of, even though I fully reject that snobbish literary tendency, I'm still infected by it. Or that I don't know. I mean, I've talked about this before, where I have this, where I don't get on with these books. And yet at the same time, I periodically get the feeling that I should like them, that I should want to add them to my collection. And it never, ever works out. And this is yet another example of that. So I don't really know what I'm going to do about this, or how to really stop myself from getting dragged into this once again. And that's also part of, well, when I was going over what I wanted to talk about today, because I'll kind of think about what I've read, and so that there's I'm better prepared. There was a possibility where this could transition into talking about why I didn't make many videos this past week. There's a tag that I've been wanting to do, and I'm having a hard time figuring out a way to do that tag. Hopefully I can do it next week. But if I can't, then I think I'm just going to let it go. But we shall see. Anyway, BookTube, hopefully whatever I decide to read next week pleases me a heck of a lot more than these 4 books. But anyway, I will see you next week. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Have a great weekend. Have a great evening, and stay safe.